It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, nothing more than 2 days away from the chaos of the city. Sarah, her boyfriend Ahmed, and two of their friends, Nida and Bilal, decided to rent an old farmhouse deep in the outskirts of Muri. It was cheap, private, and had a certain rustic charm that appealed to them. The caretaker, an old man with hollow eyes, warned them before leaving. "Lock the doors before sunset, and don't open them, no matter what you hear at night." They laughed, assuming it was just local superstition, the kind of story villagers tell tourists for effect. But that night, laughter would die in their throats. The first evening was calm. They cooked food, played cards, and even dared each other to explore the dusty attic. Everything felt perfectly ordinary, until the clock struck midnight. Sarah was the first to hear it, a slow, dragging sound coming from the upper floor. It was like someone dragging heavy furniture across the wooden boards. She thought maybe it was Bilal trying to scare them, but when she peeked into his room, he was fast asleep. The sound stopped when she moved closer to the stairs. For a moment, she convinced herself it was nothing, but as she turned to leave, she heard it again, this time followed by a faint whisper, echoing through the hallway. It wasn't in any language she recognized. It sounded like a chant, slow, rhythmic, and angry. Sarah woke Ahmed. He dismissed it, half asleep, saying, "It's probably the wind." But when the temperature in their room suddenly dropped, he sat up, realizing the windows were shut tight. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were breathing. They tried to ignore it and sleep, but around 2:30 a.m., someone began knocking on the main door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Thud, thud, thud. Nida screamed from her room, saying someone was standing outside her window, a tall figure, its face pressed against the glass. Ahmed grabbed a flashlight and ran downstairs, yelling for whoever it was to leave. But when he shone the light at the door, the knocks stopped, and the flashlight flickered. Sarah followed him hesitantly. As the light came back, they saw something carved into the wood of the door. Deep scratch marks, as if made by long, bony fingers. The marks spelled something out. Letters that looked like S-T-A-Y. They backed away slowly. That's when they heard footsteps coming from above them, even though no one was upstairs. The floorboards creaked rhythmically, pacing back and forth. Ahmed and Bilal armed themselves with kitchen knives and climbed the stairs. The air grew colder with every step. A faint humming echoed, and the smell of old rot filled their noses. When they reached the landing, they saw something that froze their blood. A door at the end of the hallway, slightly open, even though it had been locked when they arrived. From the gap, a dim red glow seeped out, pulsing like a heartbeat. Bilal whispered, "This wasn't open before." Ahmed pushed the door open slowly, and what they saw inside would haunt them forever. The room was completely empty, except for a small wooden chair placed in the center, and on it sat a decaying doll, its face cracked, one eye missing. The red light was coming from behind it, glowing faintly through a broken window. But as Ahmed took a step closer, the doll's head turned, just slightly, and a whisper filled the room. "You shouldn't have come." They bolted down the stairs, locking themselves in the living room until morning. None of them slept a second that night. The whispers continued, circling the house, followed by the sound of footsteps just outside the windows, pacing, waiting. When dawn finally came, the caretaker returned. He looked at their pale faces and said calmly, "You didn't lock the attic door, did you?" Sarah's voice trembled. "No, we didn't even touch it." The caretaker's face went cold. Greater than she's awake again. He refused to explain further. They packed their things and left immediately, never looking back. Weeks later, Sarah searched online for stories about the house. she found an old newspaper clipping. Local family found dead in farmhouse. Cause unknown. Only clue, the words, "Stay with me," carved on the walls. The address was the same as the one they rented. And that night, as Sarah scrolled through the article, her phone screen flickered. And in the reflection behind her, she saw it. That same doll, sitting quietly in the corner of her room. When you live alone, silence becomes your closest companion. But for Saad, silence was never comforting. It was heavy, unsettling, and full of whispers that seemed to live in the cracks of his apartment walls. He had recently moved into a small flat on the outskirts of Lahore after his divorce. It was cheap, and the building, though old, seemed peaceful enough. The neighbors kept to themselves, and the nights were quiet. But on his third night there, Saad realized the quiet wasn't normal. It was forced, as though the building itself was holding its breath. That night, around 1:15 a.m., he heard something strange. A faint, rhythmic knocking. Not from the main door, but from inside the apartment, behind the bathroom door. 3 gentle taps. Tap, tap, tap. He froze. The bathroom light was off, and he knew for a fact that he hadn't used it since brushing his teeth hours earlier. He approached it slowly, his phone flashlight trembling in his hand. "Hello?" he whispered, feeling foolish. No response. Only the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. He opened the door. Nothing. The air inside was cold and smelled faintly of wet earth, like rain-soaked soil. He turned the light on and checked the corners. Empty. Just the sound of dripping water from the old tap. Trying to calm himself, he went back to bed. But just as he lay down, he heard a soft voice, clear and deliberate, coming from the bathroom again. Greater than "Don't close the door." Saad sat up instantly. His blood turned to ice. He stared into the dark hallway, unable to breathe. The bathroom door, which he swore he had left half open, was now slowly closing on its own, creaking shut until the latch clicked. That night, he didn't sleep. Every few minutes he'd hear faint knocking again, sometimes from the bathroom, sometimes from the walls, sometimes from the ceiling, like something moving inside the structure of the apartment. By morning, the noise stopped. He convinced himself it had to be the plumbing or some old pipe. But later that day, he ran into his neighbor, an old woman named Mina, who lived across the hall. When he mentioned the noises, she stared at him for a long moment and said quietly, "You're staying in flat 302, aren't you?" He nodded. Her lips tightened. "Greater than. You shouldn't be there. The last man who rented it. He used to talk about the same voice. He said it came from behind the bathroom wall. One night, he stopped answering calls. They found him dead, door locked from the inside. And his fingernails." She stopped mid-sentence and shook her head, refusing to say more. Saad tried to laugh it off, but her words stayed with him. That night, he decided to record the sounds. He placed his phone near the bathroom door and left it recording as he lay on his bed, pretending to sleep. At 2:37 a.m., the tapping began again. Then, the whispering. It was faint, but he could hear it clearly. "Greater than, help me. Please. Let me out." He wanted to run, but something about the voice, it sounded desperate, human. Against every instinct, Saad approached the door and whispered back, "Who's there?" The voice replied instantly, as if waiting for him. "Greater than, behind the wall." Saad hesitated, then slowly pressed his ear to the cold tile wall. What he heard next nearly made him scream. "It's so dark in here." The voice was directly behind the wall, not muffled, not distant, as if someone was trapped inside the concrete. Panicking, he grabbed a hammer from his toolkit and began striking the wall, desperate to find whoever was there. Each hit echoed through the apartment until finally a small crack formed. From the crack, a black, tar-like liquid began to seep out, thick, slow, and reeking of decay. Saad dropped the hammer and stumbled back. The whisper turned into a shriek. The entire wall began to vibrate violently, as if something was pushing from the other side. He ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. The knob refused to turn. Behind him, the voice was no longer pleading. It was mocking. Greater than, "You open the door for me." The bathroom door burst open violently, slamming against the wall. The light flickered and went out. In the darkness, Saad could barely make out a figure crawling from the bathroom floor. Long hair covering its face, limbs bending in unnatural angles, dripping with that same black liquid. He screamed and kicked the main door until it finally gave way. He ran into the hallway, pounding on Mina's door for help. She opened it just in time to see him collapse, trembling and covered in black stains. When police arrived the next morning, they found no trace of any figure or liquid. But inside the bathroom wall, where Saad had struck it, they discovered something horrifying. A small, bricked-up cavity containing a human skeleton, curled up, its hands pressed against the inner side of the wall. On the recording from Saad's phone, one final whisper could be heard, clear as day. "Thank you for letting me out." And after that night, Flat 302 was sealed permanently. But neighbors still claim, when the building is quiet, you can hear a soft tapping from inside the walls, counting the days until someone new moves in. For Haroon, driving a taxi through Karachi's late-night streets was just a way to survive. The city never really slept. Neon lights flickered, stray dogs barked, and the hum of distant engines filled the silence. He liked it that way. The noise meant he wasn't alone. But that changed one night in November. It was a little past 2 a.m. when Haroon's phone buzzed with a new ride request, an address near an abandoned highway leading out of the city. He almost declined it. The place had a bad reputation. No lights, no police patrols, and stories of disappearances. But the fare was high, and he couldn't afford to say no. He followed the GPS, the road growing emptier with each turn. Streetlights vanished one by one until his car headlights were the only source of light. A thick fog rolled across the road, swallowing everything in sight. Then he saw her, a woman standing at the side of the road, dressed in white, her head lowered, hair covering her face. She wasn't holding a phone, but as soon as Haroon stopped, his ride app marked the passenger as arrived. "Madam," he called out, lowering the window slightly. "Did you book a ride?" The woman nodded slowly without raising her head. Something about her movements felt wrong, too slow, too heavy. Against his better judgment, he unlocked the back door. She entered silently, the temperature in the car dropping instantly. Haroon felt a chill crawl up his spine. He glanced at the mirror. Her face was still hidden, but he noticed something strange. Her reflection in the rearview mirror was delayed, moving a second after she did. He swallowed hard and started the engine. "Where to?" he asked. Her voice came out like a whisper carried by the wind, greater than just drive. So he drove. The fog outside thickened until the world beyond the windshield became a pale blur. The car clock blinked 2:33 a.m., but for some reason, time seemed to move slower. The GPS no longer showed a route, only a blank gray screen. Haroon tried small talk to calm himself. "It's cold tonight, huh?" No answer, just soft breathing behind him. He peeked into the mirror again and froze. Her head was turned toward him now, but her face was still obscured. Only her mouth was visible, and it was smiling, wide, too wide. He nearly slammed on the brakes, but before he could speak, The radio turned on by itself, static at first, then a faint, distorted voice came through. Greater than, you shouldn't have picked her up. Haroon's heart began to race. He looked at the woman again. She was staring straight ahead now, whispering something under her breath, over and over, like a chant. Her hands, pale and thin, rested motionless on her lap. "Madam, I think we've gone too far," he said, trying to sound calm. "I'll drop you at the main road, okay?" No reply, only that whispering sound growing louder. He decided to stop the car. But when he pressed the brake, the pedals sank, the car didn't slow down. The headlights flickered, and the dashboard lights went out completely. The engine roared as if something else had taken control. Then, for a moment, the fog cleared, and he saw where they were. The road ahead ended abruptly at a broken bridge overlooking a deep ravine. Panicking, Haroon yanked the handbrake. The car screeched to a stop just inches from the edge. His heart hammered in his chest. He turned to yell at the woman, but the back seat was empty. The door was still locked. He stepped out, shaking, scanning the area with his flashlight. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the back seat, there was a wet handprint. Small, feminine, and beside it, an old photograph. He picked it up. It was blurry and aged, showing a man standing beside the same taxi model as his. But the license plate was identical. And next to the man was the same woman in white. He stumbled back, realizing what he was holding. The woman in the photo had died years ago, in a car crash on that same bridge. The article he found later said her driver had fallen asleep and gone off the edge. Both died instantly. But that wasn't what terrified Haroon the most. The next morning, when he checked his ride app history, there was no record of that passenger or that trip. The last entry was from an hour earlier, yet his mileage showed he'd driven over 30 kilometers during that missing time. And when he got into his car later that day, the rearview mirror had fogged over from the inside. In the center of it, drawn by a slender fingertip, were 3 words, greater than "see you soon." Haroon quit driving night shifts after that. But sometimes when he passes by that abandoned road, his car radio flickers to life for no reason. And through the static, he swears he can still hear her whispering from the back seat. Greater than drive.